Hello everyone, today I'm going to be presenting my philosophy project and it is What is Life Experience Through Philosophy? And I'm Kaylin VanHaaften. So first I'm going to just discuss what's going to be presented in this presentation. So first we're going to go through our introduction, then we're going to go through what each philosopher believed in, and then how each philosopher connects to lived experience. Finally, we'll do connecting to other philosophers I have learned this semester, and then we'll wrap it up with a conclusion. Now let's start with the introduction. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the ideas of Descartes, Kant, and Heidegger and how they viewed our lived experiences and how we live in everyday life. From there, I'm going to connect them to some other philosophers and their texts. All these philosophers I'm going to talk about today share with us different views on life, experience, knowledge, and being human. Some will relate back to each other, but others will talk about how they disagree with the philosopher before them and how they changed their idea. Just so you have an idea what each philosopher looks like, here they are. In the top left-hand corner, we have Descartes. In the middle, we have Kant. And on the right-hand side, we have Heidegger. Now let's start with a background of what each of our three philosophers believed in and the theories connected to those beliefs. These backgrounds will help us discuss for how we understand lived experience. Now let's start off the background with Descartes. Let's figure out what he was up to in his text and what he believed in and what his theories are. Descartes went through a period where he wanted to find out what is really true and how we can get there. He didn't trust what he saw or felt and instead began a process of doubt. He doubted his senses, the outside world, his own body, and even the beliefs he had been taught growing up. This led him to the conclusion that if he is doubting, then at least something must exist that is doing the doubting. From there, he said his famous phrase, "I think, therefore I am." This one truth became the foundation of all knowledge for him. By doing this, Descartes made a divide between the mind and the body. He thought the mind is what does all the thinking and knows the truth, while the body is like a shell that carries the mind around. According to Descartes, the body can trick us, so we can't really trust it. That's why he believed only the mind leads us to the real truth. He built his knowledge on the idea that we have to step away from our senses and rely on thought and reason alone. Now, let's talk about the background of our next philosopher, Kant. Kant came after Descartes and didn't like Descartes' idea and how the body wasn't involved. Kant agreed that the mind plays an important role, but he argued that the body, our senses, has a huge part in helping us understand the world. He believed that the knowledge is shaped by both the world around us and how our minds interpret it. So instead of the mind being the only source of experience, like Descartes imagined, Kant saw the mind and body working together like a puzzle. For example, we might know the idea of a chair with our mind, but our senses help us experience the chair, whether it's smooth or rough, hard or soft, warm or cold. Kant believed in a concept called synthetic a priori knowledge. This is the idea that some truths about the world come from our minds before we even experience things. But we also need real-world experience to fully understand anything. Kant believes truth isn't just in the mind or in the world, it comes from a combination of both. Finally, let's talk about the background of our final philosopher, Heidegger. Heidegger didn't want us to follow the same route as Descartes and Kant. Instead, he wanted to go in a totally different direction. Rather than starting with the mind, or thinking about how the mind and body work together, Heidegger asked, what if we just start with how we are already living? What if we look at everyday life and how we experience things in that moment? He thought the philosophy should look at our existence as human beings already living in the world, not as a mind or separated beings trying to figure out how to connect to the world. Heidegger introduced the concept of facticity, the idea that we are already living in certain situations, cultures, and bodies, and those facts shape our experiences. We don't choose the time, place, or body we're born into, but they affect how we experience life. Heidegger wants us to look into those experiences and see what they mean for us as individuals. For him, philosophy is not about trying to connect to the world. It's about asking questions from where we already are, right here in our lives. Now that we've covered the backgrounds of our three philosophers, let's apply these ideas to the concept of lived experience, how we actually live, feel, and interact in our day-to-day lives, and each philosopher's view on it. Let's return to Descartes. As we reviewed, he believed in mind-body dualism, the idea that the mind, our intellect, and our body, our senses, are separate. If you really think about it, this creates a disconnection from the world. If the body is just a shell, and the mind is the only real part of you, then what happens to things like touch, emotion, or pain? They become less trustworthy. This could make it harder to trust our lived experiences because it encourages us to mistrust how we feel and how we rely, or only rely, on how we think. Now let's go back to Kant. Kant brings the mind and body back together. He helps us understand that both are necessary to have a complete experience. His theory of categories, the mind, helps us make sense of the world, followed by our sensations. This allows for a deeper experience. We don't just think about a chair. We see it, touch it, and sit in it. Kant shows that knowledge isn't just built through logic, but through interaction with the world. This means our lived experience is not just mental. It's grounded in our physical presence, shaped by both what we know beforehand and what we know after the experience and in the moment of the experience. Now let's finalize with Heidegger. Heidegger takes us even further by saying, don't overthink it, just live. Philosophy is asking every day, what does this mean? Why do I do this? What matters to me? Heidegger would say that how we live each moment is the way we relate to the world through daily habits, tools, and relationships. And that is the core of human experience. And since each person's facticity is different, each person's experience is different. And that's not a problem. It's a part of being human. So now that we have wrapped up the background of each philosopher and how their background relates to how they view lived experiences, let's talk about other philosophers we have learned this semester, how they relate back to these philosophers that I just talked about, and connect their ideas to the philosophers, as well as see their own viewpoints on lived experience. Now, let's talk about two other philosophers that we learned this semester and how they relate back to Descartes, Kant, and Heidegger's ideas of lived experience. First is Plato. His cave allegory theory is famous in philosophy. In the story, people are chained in a cave, seeing only shadows on the wall. For Plato, those shadows are illusions, and real truth is outside the cave, in the world of forms. Descartes would agree. He would say, we must doubt the shadows and go find the real truth beyond our senses. Kant would also agree in part. He'd say the shadows are our experiences, but true knowledge comes from when we put our mind's categories in those experiences. Heidegger, on the other hand, might say, those shadows are a part of life. What does it matter if they're true or not? They're true in some way, but how we relate to them in our daily existence. He asked, how do these shadows relate to how we live? Now let's move on to our second philosopher, Russell. He wondered if our senses could really be trusted. In his text, he discusses appearance versus reality. He believes we cannot trust our senses. He questions if how things appear to us is really true. This ties into Descartes, who would say, yes, doubt the senses, and seek the truth in the mind. Kant would respond, we have to trust our senses in order to get the true and full experience. Heidegger once again would ask, what does the experience mean in real life? What does the experience tell you about life? Talking about those two philosophers and how they relate back to Descartes, Kant, and Heidegger's idea helps us see how deep the conversation about lived experience goes. It's about what kind of life we want to live and how we choose to see the world. So in conclusion, Descartes wants certainty and believes the mind is where truth lives. He puts the body to the side. Kant wants to bring the mind and body together to show that our knowledge comes from both. And Heidegger wants us to slow down, look around, and realize that philosophy is already happening in our everyday lives. Each of these views challenges us to reflect on how we know things, how we live, and what it means to be human. Philosophy isn't just about questions. It's about discovering who we are, how we relate to others, and how we make meaning out of the world. And that's what we're already doing every single day we live.